The slap echoed through the saloon's back office like a gunshot, and Victoria Thorne knew immediately that her life in Ash Fork, Arizona was about to change forever. She stood trembling before Marcus Hartwell, the owner of the Golden Rose Saloon, her hand still stinging from where she had struck him across his leering face. His expression shifted from shock to rage in an instant, his thick fingers reaching up to touch the red mark blooming across his cheek. "You little witch," he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "Do you have any idea what you have just done?" Victoria's heart hammered against her ribcage, but she refused to let him see her fear. She had worked at the Golden Rose for nearly 2 years, serving drinks and cleaning tables, enduring the rough language and rougher behavior of the miners and cowboys who frequented the establishment. She had tolerated Marcus's inappropriate comments, his lingering stares, and his convenient excuses to brush past her in narrow hallways. But when he had cornered her in his office, when his hands had reached for her waist and pulled her against him, when his whiskey-soaked breath had invaded her space with promises of extra pay if she would just be nice to him, something inside her had snapped. "I know exactly what I have done," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I protected myself from a man who cannot take no for an answer." Marcus's eyes narrowed to slits. "Protected yourself? You ungrateful girl. I gave you this job when no one else would hire you. A woman alone, no family, no prospects. And this is how you repay me? You gave me a job, and I have worked every day I was supposed to work, every hour I was supposed to work. I have earned every penny you paid me, but I will not earn it that way." Victoria straightened her spine, forcing herself to meet his furious gaze. "I quit." "Quit?" Marcus laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Oh no, Miss Thorne, you do not get to quit. You are fired, and by the time I am done talking to every business owner in this town, you will not find work anywhere in Ash Fork. You will be begging in the streets before the week is out." The threat was real. Victoria knew how small towns worked, how gossip spread faster than wildfire through dry grass. Marcus Hartwell had connections throughout Ash Fork, investments in half the businesses on Main Street. If he wanted to ruin her, he could. But even knowing that, she could not bring herself to regret striking him. She would rather starve than submit to his demands. "Then I suppose I will be begging," she said quietly. She untied her apron, folded it with deliberate care, and placed it on his desk. Then she walked out of his office through the saloon's main room, where a few early afternoon drinkers glanced up with mild curiosity, and out onto the dusty street. The Arizona sun hit her like a physical blow, the October heat still fierce despite the late afternoon hour. It was 1881, and Ash Fork was a growing railroad town, bustling with opportunity for those who could seize it. Victoria had come here a year ago from Kansas City, fleeing memories of a family lost to cholera and a life that had offered nothing but sorrow. She had hoped to start fresh, to build something new. Now she stood on the wooden boardwalk, with nothing but the clothes on her back and $3 in her pocket. She walked toward the boarding house where she rented a small room, her mind racing through her limited options. She could leave Ash Fork, but traveling required money she did not have. She could try to find work before Marcus spread his poison, but word traveled fast in a town this size. She could write to distant relatives back east, but pride prevented her from admitting defeat so soon. Lost in thought, Victoria did not notice the man on horseback until his shadow fell across her path. She looked up, startled, and found herself staring at a tall figure silhouetted against the sun. He dismounted with the easy grace of someone who had spent more time in the saddle than on solid ground, and as he stepped closer, she could make out his features more clearly. He was perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair that fell just past his collar and eyes the color of prairie smoke. His face was weathered from sun and wind, with strong features that spoke of both determination and kindness. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, trail-worn denim and a shirt that had seen better days, but his boots were good quality and his gun belt was well maintained. Something about him radiated quiet confidence. "Pardon me, miss," he said, touching the brim of his hat in greeting. His voice was deep and warm, with a slight drawl that suggested Texas origins. "I do not mean to intrude, but I happened to be passing by the Golden Rose just now, and I could not help but overhear raised voices. Are you all right?" Victoria felt heat rush to her cheeks. "You heard?" "Only enough to know that you refused someone's advances and lost your position because of it." His gray eyes were serious, sympathetic. "I am sorry, That is a hard thing for any woman to face. She did not know what to say. Strangers in Ash Fork rarely showed such concern, especially not for a woman they had never met. "I will manage," she said finally, though the words felt hollow, even to her own ears. The cowboy studied her for a moment, then seemed to come to a decision. "What kind of work did you do at the saloon? Serving drinks, cleaning, that sort of thing?" "Yes, and keeping accounts, managing inventory when Marcus needed help with the books. I am good with numbers." "Can you cook?" The question surprised her. "Yes, of course. Nothing fancy, but good solid meals." "Can you mend clothes, do laundry, basic household work?" Victoria felt a flutter of hope in her chest, fragile as a bird's wing. "Yes. I grew up doing all of that. My mother made sure I knew how to run a proper household." The cowboy nodded, as if confirming something to himself. "My name is Owen Ellis. I own a cattle ranch about 8 miles north of town. It is not a large operation, but it is growing. I have 6 men working for me, and right now we are all living like bachelor wolves, eating beans and hardtack, wearing clothes that should have been mended months ago. I have been meaning to hire someone to help with the domestic work, cook proper meals, keep the place civilized. Would you be interested in the position?" Victoria stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You want to hire me? Right now? You do not even know me. I know you have the courage to stand up for yourself even when it costs you dearly. I know you are honest, because dishonest people do not usually end up unemployed for refusing inappropriate advances. They just give in." Owen's expression was earnest. "I know you need work, and I need help. Seems like good timing to me. Marcus Hartwell will spread terrible things about me. He will tell everyone I am." Victoria could not finish the sentence, could not voice the lies she knew he would tell. "I do not care what Marcus Hartwell says." Owen's voice hardened slightly. "I have met men like him before. They think money gives them the right to anything they want. I am not interested in his opinion." Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back. She had not cried when Marcus fired her, and she would not cry now. "What would the wages be?" "What were you making at the saloon?" $12 a month plus tips." Owen did not hesitate. "I will pay you $36 a month, plus room and board. You would have your own cabin, small but private, meals provided, and I will supply anything you need for cooking and cleaning." Victoria's breath caught. $36, 3 times what she had been earning. It was more money than she had ever dreamed of making. But even as hope surged through her, caution held her back. "Why so much? That is extraordinarily generous. Because good help is worth paying for. Because my men will work better if they are eating real food and sleeping in clean bunks. Because it is the right thing to do." Owen met her eyes steadily. "I will not lie to you, Miss Thorne, Victoria Thorne. Miss Thorne, ranch life is hard work. You would be cooking 3 meals a day for 7 hungry men. You would be doing laundry, mending, cleaning. It is not easy, and it is not glamorous, but I promise you would be treated with respect. Any man who does not show you proper courtesy will answer to me, and that is not a conversation any of them would enjoy." There was steel beneath his quiet words, and Victoria believed him. She thought of her other options, the bleak prospects that awaited her in Ash Fork if she stayed. She thought of Marcus's threats and the long, difficult road ahead if she tried to make it on her own, with $3 to her name. "When would you want me to start?" she asked. Owen's face broke into a smile that transformed his serious features. "Today, if you are willing. I have a wagon in town picking up supplies. We could collect your things and head back to the ranch before sunset." "I do not have many things," Victoria admitted. "Just what fits in one trunk." "That will fit in the wagon just fine." Owen extended his hand to her, formal and proper. "Do we have an agreement, Miss Thorne?" Victoria looked at his outstretched hand, calloused and strong, honest and open. She thought about second chances and new beginnings. She thought about the kindness in his gray eyes and the respectful distance he maintained even as they negotiated. She made her decision. "We have an agreement, Mr. Ellis." She placed her hand in his, and his grip was warm and firm, sealing a bargain that would change both their lives in ways neither of them could yet imagine. An hour later, Victoria sat on the bench of a wagon loaded with supplies, her small trunk secured in the back among sacks of flour and coffee and dried beans. Owen rode his horse alongside the wagon, which was driven by a cheerful young man he had introduced as Tommy, one of his ranch hands. Tommy could not have been more than 20, with red hair and freckles scattered across his sunburned face. He had greeted Victoria with shy politeness, touching his hat and stammering out a welcome. As they left Ash Fork behind, Victoria watched the town recede in the distance with mixed feelings. She had not been happy there, not really, but it had been familiar. The ranch was unknown territory, and despite Owen's assurances, she felt the flutter of nervousness in her stomach. She was trusting a stranger, putting her safety and future in the hands of a man she had met only an hour ago. But what choice did she have? And more than that, something about Owen Ellis inspired trust. He had not made impossible promises or tried to convince her with flowery words. He had been straightforward and honest, offering fair terms and expecting nothing but honest work in return. That meant something. The landscape around them was stark and beautiful, red rock formations rising from scrubby desert dotted with mesquite and sage. Mountains loomed in the distance, purple in the afternoon light. The air was dry and clean, carrying the scent of dust and desert plants. Hawks circled overhead, riding the thermals, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called out. "It is beautiful country," Victoria said, breaking the comfortable silence. Tommy grinned at her. "Wait until you see the ranch, Miss Thorne. Boss has been working real hard to build something special. We have got good grazing land and a creek that runs year-round. Best water in the county." "How long have you worked for Mr. Ellis?" Victoria asked. "Going on a year now. Best job I ever had. Boss is fair, pays on time, treats us decent. Some ranchers work their hands half to death for barely enough to eat, but not Mr. Ellis. He figures if we are healthy and happy, we will work better, and he is right." Tommy guided the horses around a rough patch in the road. "We are all real glad you are coming, Miss Thorne. No offense, but we are all tired of eating Cookie's attempts at food. He is a good hand with cattle, but a terrible cook." Victoria could not help but smile. "I will do my best to feed you all properly." "That is all we can ask." Tommy glanced at her curiously. "If you do not mind me asking, what made you leave the saloon? That seems like steady work." Victoria hesitated, unsure how much to share. But Tommy's face was open and friendly, and she decided honesty was better than leaving him to wonder. "The owner wanted more from me than I was willing to give. When I refused, he fired me. Mr. Ellis happened to be in the right place at the right time." Tommy's expression darkened. "That would be Marcus Hartwell, I'm guessing. He has a reputation for that kind of thing. Good for you for standing up to him, Miss Thorne. Takes courage." "It felt more like survival than courage," Victoria admitted. "Sometimes they are the same thing." Tommy paused, then added carefully, "Just so you know, the hands at the ranch are good men. We have got Jorge and Miguel, brothers from Texas. They work harder than anyone I have ever met. There is old Cookie, who is probably 50 if he is a day. Been a cowboy his whole life. Sam is quiet but steady, best roper I have ever seen. And there is Jack, who talks enough for all of us put together. They are rough around the edges, but they will treat you right. Boss would not keep anyone around who did not." Victoria felt some of her nervousness ease. "Thank you for telling me. It helps to know what to expect." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the wagon creaking and rattling over the rough road. Owen remained on his horse nearby, sometimes riding ahead to check the path, sometimes falling back to survey the land around them. Victoria found herself watching him, noticing the easy way he sat in the saddle, the alertness in his posture even when he seemed relaxed. This was a man who was comfortable in this harsh land, who had made a life out of hard work and determination. As the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Owen rode up alongside the wagon. "We are almost there, just over this next rise." Victoria's heart quickened with anticipation. They crested a low hill, and she got her first glimpse of the Ellis Ranch spread out in the valley below. It was not large or fancy, but it had a solid, purposeful look that spoke of careful planning. A main house built of adobe and wood stood near a cottonwood-lined creek, its windows glowing warm in the evening light. Several outbuildings clustered nearby, including a long bunkhouse, a barn, and what looked like storage sheds. Corrals held horses and cattle, and she could see men moving about, finishing up the day's work. "That is your cabin there," Owen said, pointing to a small structure set slightly apart from the other buildings, shaded by a large cottonwood tree. "It used to be the original ranch house before I built the bigger one. It is small, but it should give you privacy and comfort." The cabin was modest but well-maintained, with a covered porch and real glass windows. Victoria felt a rush of relief. She had half expected a tent or a crude shack, but this looked like a real home. As the wagon rolled into the ranch yard, the men stopped their work to watch. Victoria felt their curious eyes on her, and she sat up straighter, determined to make a good first impression. These would be her employers, in a sense, the men she would be cooking for and caring for. She needed them to respect her, to see her as someone capable and professional. Owen dismounted and came to help her down from the wagon. His hands at her waist were impersonal, steadying her as her feet touched the ground after the long ride. Then he turned to the assembled men and raised his voice so they could all hear. "Men, this is Miss Victoria Thorne. As of today, she is working for the ranch, handling cooking and domestic duties. I expect you all to treat her with the utmost respect and courtesy. Anyone who has a problem with that can collect their pay and move on. Are we clear?" A chorus of agreement rose from the assembled cowboys. They ranged in age from barely 20 to well into middle age, weathered and worn by sun and hard labor, but their expressions were welcoming. "Miss Thorne, let me introduce you properly." Owen gestured to each man in turn. "That is Jorge and Miguel Rodriguez, finest vaqueros in Arizona." Two men with dark eyes and kind faces nodded to her. They were clearly brothers, with the same strong features and quiet dignity. "Welcome, señorita," Jorge said, his accent giving the words a musical quality. "It is good to have you here." "That is Sam Whoever," Owen continued, indicating a lean, scarred man with watchful eyes. "He claims not to remember his last name, so we just call him Sam." Sam touched his hat brim, saying nothing, but his eyes were not unfriendly. "Jack Morrison is the one grinning like a fool." A sandy-haired man with laugh lines around his eyes swept his hat off in an exaggerated bow. "Delighted to make your acquaintance, Miss Thorne. We have been praying for someone who can actually cook." "That is Cookie, whose real name is Frank Peterson, but everyone has called him Cookie for so long he barely answers to anything else." An older man with graying hair and a weathered face nodded. "Pay no mind to what they say about my cooking, miss. It kept them alive, did it not?" "Barely," Jack interjected, earning a good-natured glare from Cookie. "And you have already met Tommy." Owen smiled at the youngest cowboy. "He talks less than Jack, but not by much." Victoria smiled at the assembled group. "I am pleased to meet you all. I hope to make your meals more enjoyable and keep your living quarters comfortable. If you have any special requests or needs, please let me know, and I will do my best to accommodate you." "Special requests?" Jack's eyes lit up. "Can you make pie? I have not had a decent pie in 3 years." "I can make pie," Victoria confirmed. "Apple, berry, whatever fruit is available." A collective sigh of happiness rose from the men, and Victoria felt herself relax slightly. They seemed genuinely glad to have her there, not resentful or hostile. That was more than she had dared to hope for. "All right, give the lady some breathing room," Owen said, though his tone was amused rather than stern. "Miss Thorne has had a long day. Tommy, help her get settled in her cabin. The rest of you, finish up your chores. We will have a proper meal tomorrow, but tonight we will make do with what Cookie has already prepared." "More beans," someone muttered, earning chuckles from the others. Tommy carried Victoria's trunk, while Owen led her to the cabin. Inside, it was simple but clean, with a real bed covered in quilts, a small table with 2 chairs, a wood stove for heat and cooking, and several shelves for storage. Someone had left a lamp on the table, and when Owen lit it, warm light filled the space. "It is not fancy," Owen said, watching her face carefully as if trying to gauge her reaction. "But it is solid and weatherproof. The stove draws well, and the bed is comfortable. There is a pump just outside for water, and if you need anything else, just let me know." Victoria walked slowly around the small space, running her hand over the smooth wood of the table, examining the sturdy shelves. After the cramped boarding house room where she had been living, this felt like a palace. It was hers, private and safe, and she did not have to share a bathroom with 6 other residents or listen to noise from the saloon bleeding through thin walls all night. "It is perfect," she said quietly. "Thank you, Mr. Ellis." "Call me Owen. We are not formal out here." He shifted his weight, suddenly looking less certain than he had all afternoon. "I want you to feel comfortable here, Miss Thorne. If any of the men make you uncomfortable, if you need anything at all, you come find me. My house is just across the yard. I mean what I said about respect. You have my word on that." Victoria met his eyes and saw complete sincerity there. "I believe you, and please call me Victoria, if we are not being formal." Something flickered in Owen's expression, something warm and appreciative. "Victoria, that is a good, strong name. My mother's choice. She said I was born during a thunderstorm and came into the world fighting, so I needed a name that meant victory." "Seems fitting." Owen smiled, and Victoria noticed how it softened his features, made him look younger and more approachable. "I will let you settle in. There is bread and cheese in that basket on the shelf, and some cold chicken from town. Help yourself to anything you need. Tomorrow morning, I will show you the kitchen and pantry in the main house, and you can start organizing things how you like them." "What time do the men usually eat breakfast?" Victoria asked, already thinking ahead to her responsibilities. "Sunup generally. We start work early to beat the heat." "Then I will be ready." Victoria squared her shoulders. "I will earn my wages, Owen. You will not regret hiring me." "I do not doubt that for a moment." Owen touched his hat brim in farewell, then left her alone in her new home. Victoria stood in the quiet cabin, listening to his footsteps fade away, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. Voices called back and forth in Spanish and English. Horses whinnied in the corrals, and somewhere someone was playing a harmonica, the notes sweet and melancholy in the desert evening. She sank down onto the bed, suddenly exhausted. It had been the longest day of her life. This morning she had woken in her boarding house room, expecting just another ordinary day of serving drinks and cleaning tables. Now she was 8 miles from town, surrounded by strangers, embarking on a completely new life. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, but as she unpacked her few belongings and prepared for bed, Victoria felt something she had not experienced in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where she could build a real life, where her hard work would be valued and respected. And maybe, though she barely dared to acknowledge the thought, she had found something else too, in the form of a gray-eyed cowboy who had offered her a second chance when she needed it most. The next morning, Victoria woke before dawn to the sound of roosters crowing. For a moment she was disoriented, not recognizing the unfamiliar ceiling above her, or the quality of the silence around her. Then memory returned, and she sat up quickly, aware that she had work to do. She dressed in one of her 2 good work dresses, a simple brown cotton that was practical and sturdy, then stepped out into the cool morning air. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, stars fading as dawn approached. The ranch was already stirring, lamps glowing in the bunkhouse, the smell of smoke from cook fires drifting on the breeze. Owen emerged from his house as she crossed the yard, and she was struck again by his presence, the way he moved with purpose and confidence. He had clearly been up for a while, dressed for work in worn denim and boots dusty from the barn. "Morning," he said, his voice warm. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Victoria admitted. It was so quiet. Too quiet. Town girls sometimes have trouble adjusting to ranch life. It can feel lonely out here. Victoria shook her head. "Not too quiet. Perfect. I never realized how much noise bothered me until it was gone." Owen looked pleased. "Good. Come on. I will show you the kitchen and get you started. The men will be in from morning chores soon, hungry as bears." The kitchen in the main house was larger than Victoria had expected, with a big cast-iron stove, a long work table, and shelves stocked with basic supplies. Owen showed her where everything was stored, pointing out the pantry loaded with flour, sugar, salt, dried beans, and preserved vegetables. There was a smokehouse with cured meat, a root cellar with potatoes and onions, and laying hens that provided fresh eggs. "I try to keep things well stocked," Owen explained. "We are far enough from town that running out of staples is a real problem. Once a month we make a supply run, but between times we rely on what we have here. If you need anything special, just let me know and I will get it." Victoria surveyed the resources available and felt her confidence grow. This was familiar territory. She had been cooking since she was tall enough to reach the stove, and she knew how to make good food from simple ingredients. "I can work with this," she said. "Give me an hour and I will have breakfast ready." Owen nodded. "I will spread the word." He paused at the door, then turned back. "Thank you, Victoria, for taking a chance on this place. On me." "I could say the same thing," she replied softly. "You took a chance on me when you had no reason to." I had plenty of reason. His gray eyes were serious. I am a good judge of character. I knew you were exactly what this place needed. Then he was gone, leaving Victoria alone in the kitchen with her supplies and her determination to prove him right. She tied on an apron, built up the fire in the stove, and got to work. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she mixed biscuit dough, fried thick slices of bacon, scrambled eggs with fresh cream, and made gravy from the bacon drippings. She found a tin of molasses and made a batch of beans sweetened Texas style, and she brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead. By the time the men began filing into the dining room attached to the kitchen, the table was laden with food that smelled like heaven. Victoria heard their exclamations of delight and felt a flutter of pride. She carried out platters of biscuits and bacon, bowls of eggs and beans, and a big pot of steaming coffee. "Miss Thorne, if you were not already hired, I would marry you just for this breakfast," Jack declared, loading his plate with enthusiasm. "Behave yourself," Owen said mildly, but there was warmth in his eyes as he looked at Victoria. "This looks wonderful." The men ate with the single-minded focus of hard-working people faced with good food, and Victoria found herself relaxing as she watched them enjoy her cooking. This was something she was good at, something she could take pride in. As they ate, they talked about the day's work ahead, the cattle that needed moving to fresh grazing, the fence that needed mending, the horses that needed shoeing. Victoria listened as she refilled coffee cups and brought out more biscuits. She was learning the rhythm of the ranch, the endless cycle of work that kept the place running. It was hard work, she could see that clearly, but there was satisfaction in it too. These men were building something, creating a life from this harsh land through determination and sweat. When breakfast was finished and the men had headed out to their various tasks, Victoria began the work of cleaning up. She washed dishes, wiped down the table, swept the floor. Then she explored the rest of the house, noting what needed attention. The place was not dirty exactly, but it had the neglected feel of a home without a woman's touch. Dust had settled on surfaces, windows needed washing, and the floors could use a good scrubbing. She spent the morning cleaning, working her way through the main rooms methodically. It felt good to make the space better, to restore order and cleanliness. Around midday, she took a break to prepare a simple lunch of sandwiches and cold lemonade, which she brought out to the men working in the corrals. They greeted her with grateful smiles and dusty faces, and she noticed Owen watching her with an expression she could not quite read. The days began to fall into a pattern. Victoria woke before dawn, prepared breakfast, cleaned up, made lunch, worked on household tasks, prepared dinner, and then fell into bed, exhausted but satisfied. The work was harder than anything she had done at the saloon, but it was also more rewarding. She took pride in the meals she prepared, in the clean clothes she mended and washed, in the orderly state of the house and bunkhouse. The men treated her with unfailing courtesy, exactly as Owen had promised. They were respectful without being distant, friendly without being inappropriate. Jorge and Miguel taught her a few words of Spanish and told her stories about growing up in Texas. Sam rarely spoke, but always nodded his thanks for his meals. Jack kept her entertained with tall tales that she suspected were only half true. Cookie swallowed his pride and asked for her recipes, admitting that his cooking had indeed been terrible. Tommy followed her around like a puppy, eager to help with anything that required lifting or carrying, and Owen. Victoria found herself increasingly aware of Owen, of his presence in the house and around the ranch, of the sound of his voice and the warmth of his rare smiles. He was unfailingly kind to her, but maintained a respectful distance, never presuming on their working relationship. He asked her opinion about household matters and actually listened to her answers. He noticed when she was tired and told her to take breaks. He made sure she had everything she needed and thanked her regularly for her hard work. She tried not to think about the way her heart beat faster when he walked into a room, or the way she found excuses to bring him coffee when he was working on accounts in his office, or the way she caught herself watching him through the kitchen window as he worked with the horses. This was her employer, nothing more. She had a good job here, the best she had ever had, and she would not risk it by developing foolish feelings. But the feelings grew anyway, quiet and persistent, like flowers pushing up through rocky ground. 3 weeks after Victoria arrived at the ranch, Owen found her in the kitchen one evening after dinner, kneading bread dough for the next day. The other men had retired to the bunkhouse, and the house was quiet except for the rhythmic sound of her hands working the dough. "You do not have to work this late," Owen said from the doorway. "You have already put in a full day." Victoria looked up, startled. She had not heard him approach. "I do not mind. I like to have the bread ready to bake first thing in the morning." Owen walked into the kitchen, leaning against the work table near where she stood. "You are doing too much, Victoria. I see you working from dawn until late at night. You need rest too." "I am earning my wages," she said, punching the dough down perhaps more forcefully than necessary. "You have already earned them 3 times over." Owen's voice was gentle. "The men are happier than they have been in months. The house looks better than it ever has. The food is incredible. You have exceeded every expectation I had." Victoria felt warmth spread through her chest at his praise, but she kept her eyes on the dough. "I just want to do good work. You are doing excellent work, but you are also running yourself ragged." Owen reached out and stilled her hands with his own, stopping her frantic kneading. "Take tomorrow afternoon off. Rest, read, go for a walk. Whatever you want, the world will not end if you take a few hours for yourself." The touch of his hands on hers sent electricity through Victoria's body. She looked up and found Owen's face closer than she had realized, his gray eyes full of concern and something else, something warmer and more complicated. For a long moment, they stood frozen, hands touching, awareness crackling between them like lightning before a storm. Then Owen stepped back, releasing her hands, and the spell broke. "Sorry, I did not mean to overstep. I just worry that you are working too hard." "No, you are right." Victoria's voice sounded strange to her own ears, breathless and uncertain. "I will take some time tomorrow afternoon. Maybe I will walk down to the creek. I have not had a chance to really explore the ranch yet. The creek is beautiful this time of year. There is a spot about half a mile upstream where willows make a shaded pool, very peaceful." Owen moved toward the door, putting distance between them. "Thank you again, Victoria, for everything you do here. It means more than you know." After he left, Victoria stood alone in the kitchen, her hands still tingling from his touch, her heart racing. She tried to focus on the bread dough, on the simple, familiar task, but her mind kept returning to that moment of connection, to the look in Owen's eyes before he pulled away. She told herself she was imagining things, reading too much into a simple expression of concern from an employer, but some part of her knew better. Some part of her recognized what was growing between them, dangerous and inevitable as a summer storm. The next afternoon, true to her word, Victoria took time away from her duties and walked upstream along the creek. The ranch fell away behind her, and she found herself in a landscape of startling beauty. The creek gurgled over smooth stones, bordered by willows and cottonwoods that provided blessed shade. Birds sang in the branches, and dragonflies darted over the water's surface. She found the pool Owen had mentioned, a place where the creek widened and deepened, the water clear as glass. Willows draped over the edges, creating a private bower. It was peaceful and lovely, and Victoria sank down onto a flat rock near the water's edge, feeling tension drain from her shoulders. She had not realized how much she needed this, how much the constant work had worn on her. For the first time in weeks, she let herself simply be, without tasks demanding her attention or schedules to maintain. She took off her shoes and stockings, hiked her skirt up, and dangled her feet in the cool water, sighing with pleasure. "I thought I might find you here." Victoria gasped and nearly fell off her rock as Owen emerged from the trees. He held up his hands in apology. "Sorry, I did not mean to startle you. I was checking on some cattle upstream and saw you walking this way." "It is all right." Victoria's heart was pounding, though whether from surprise or from Owen's sudden appearance, she was not entirely sure. "You were right about this place. It is beautiful. May I join you, or would you prefer solitude?" Victoria knew she should say she wanted to be alone, should maintain professional distance, should protect herself from these growing feelings. But instead, she heard herself say, "Please, join me." Owen sat down on the rock beside her, not too close but near enough that she was acutely aware of him. He pulled off his own boots and rolled up his pant legs, then stuck his feet in the water with a contented sigh. "I come here sometimes when I need to think, something about water that helps clear the mind." "What do you think about?" Victoria asked, then immediately felt foolish. "Sorry, that is too personal a question." "Not at all." Owen picked up a smooth pebble and tossed it into the pool, watching the ripples spread. I think about the ranch mostly, about where I want it to go, what I want to build here. I think about my family back in Texas, wonder if I should write to them more often. I think about whether I made the right choices, leaving home to start over out here. Do you think you made the right choice? Most days, yes. Owen glanced at her, especially lately. Victoria's breath caught, but she forced herself to keep her voice light. Because the men are eating better? Because the whole place feels more like a home. Owen's voice was serious. You have changed things here, Victoria. Made it better in ways that have nothing to do with cooking and cleaning. The men are happier. I am happier. The ranch feels complete now, in a way it never did before. Victoria did not know what to say to that. She stared at the water, watching it flow past, constant and eternal. I am happy here too, she finally admitted. Happier than I have been in a long time, maybe ever. Even though ranch life is harder than town life, the work is harder, but the life is better. In town, I always felt like I was just surviving, waiting for something to happen. Here, I feel like I am actually living. She paused, gathering courage. And the people are better too. Even though we are a bunch of rough cowboys who probably smell like cattle half the time. Victoria laughed. Even then. They sat in comfortable silence, feet dangling in the cool water, the afternoon sun filtering through the willow leaves above them. Birds called back and forth, and somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. It was peaceful and perfect, and Victoria wished she could freeze this moment, preserve it forever. Can I ask you something? Owen's voice was careful, gentle. You do not have to answer if it is too personal. You can ask. Why were you alone in Ash Fork? A woman like you, smart and capable, you should have had family, friends, a whole life. What brought you to a dusty railroad town by yourself? Victoria had known this question would come eventually. She took a breath and let it out slowly. I had a family, parents, 2 younger sisters, a life in Kansas City. Then cholera came. It swept through the city like wildfire. My father got sick first, then my mother, then both my sisters. I was the only one who did not catch it. I nursed them all, but I could not save them. Within 2 weeks, I went from having a family to having no one. Owen's hand found hers, squeezing gently. I am so sorry, Victoria. The house had to be sold to pay debts. I had nothing left but a little money and memories. I could not stay in Kansas City. Everything there reminded me of what I had lost. So I got on a train and rode until I felt far enough away. That happened to be Ash Fork. She looked down at their joined hands. I have been alone for a year now. Some days it feels like another lifetime ago. Other days it feels like yesterday. You are not alone anymore, Owen said quietly. You have people here who care about you, who want you to be happy. Victoria turned to look at him, and the expression on his face took her breath away. There was compassion there and sympathy, but also something deeper, something that made her pulse race and her throat go dry. Owen, she whispered, not sure what she wanted to say, but needing to say his name. He lifted his free hand and cupped her cheek, his touch gentle and hesitant. Tell me to stop. I do not want you to stop. Owen leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away, but Victoria did not move. When his lips touched hers, it was soft and sweet, a question more than a demand. Victoria's eyes drifted closed, and she leaned into the kiss, her hand coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart beating hard under her palm, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. When they finally pulled apart, Owen rested his forehead against hers. I have wanted to do that since the day I met you. You have only known me 3 weeks, Victoria said, but she was smiling. 3 weeks, and I already cannot imagine this place without you. Owen's hand was still on her cheek, his thumb stroking gently across her cheekbone. I know this complicates things. You work for me, and I do not want you to feel pressured or uncomfortable. If you want to pretend this never happened, I will understand. I do not want to pretend it never happened. Victoria's voice was firm, despite the butterflies in her stomach. I feel something too, Owen. I have been trying not to, trying to be professional, but I feel it. Owen's smile was like sunrise, warm and bright. So, what do we do now? I do not know, Victoria admitted. I have never been in this situation before. Everything is complicated. You are my employer. We work together every day. If something goes wrong, I could lose my job, my home, everything. Nothing is going to go wrong. Owen's conviction was absolute. but I understand your concern. We can take this slow, Victoria. No pressure, no expectations. We will just see where it goes." Taking it slow sounds wise. Victoria took a breath. "But Owen, I need you to understand something. I am not interested in a casual flirtation. I have had too much loss in my life to play games with my heart. If this is just attraction, if it is not serious, I need to know now before I let myself fall any further." Owen's expression turned serious. "This is not casual for me, Victoria. I do not know exactly what it is yet, but I know it is important. I know you are important. I want to explore this, see where it leads, but with honesty and respect. Does that sound fair? More than fair?" Victoria squeezed his hand. "Thank you for being straightforward with me." "I will always be straightforward with you. That is a promise." Owen stood and helped her to her feet. "We should probably get back before the men start wondering where we are and send out a search party." They walked back to the ranch together, not holding hands, but walking close enough that their shoulders occasionally brushed. Victoria felt like she was floating, her heart light in a way it had not been since before her family died. She had not thought she would find happiness again, had not dared to hope for connection and warmth. But here it was, unexpected and precious. Over the following weeks, Victoria and Owen began a courtship conducted in stolen moments and quiet conversations. They talked while she cooked, and he pretended to need help with something in the kitchen. They sat together on the porch after the men had gone to bed, watching stars wheel overhead. They walked to the creek on Sunday afternoons, their time together a secret refuge from the demands of ranch life. The men noticed, of course. Cowboys might work with cattle, but they were not blind to human nature. Victoria saw the knowing looks they exchanged, the small smiles when Owen found yet another reason to be wherever Victoria was working. But they said nothing, and for that, Victoria was grateful. The relationship was still too new, too fragile to expose to scrutiny. Owen was everything Marcus Hartwell had not been. Where Marcus had grabbed and demanded, Owen asked permission. Where Marcus had taken, Owen gave. He was patient with Victoria's hesitations, understanding of her fears. He told her about his own past, the family ranch in Texas he had left to build something of his own, the hard years of establishing the Ellis Ranch, the loneliness of building a life without someone to share it with. "I always thought I would have a wife and family by now," he admitted one evening as they sat by the creek. "I am 30 years old, not getting any younger. But I never met anyone who seemed right, who I could imagine spending my life with. Until you." Victoria's heart swelled at his words. "I never thought I would want to risk loving someone again. After losing my family, it seemed safer to stay alone. But you make me want to be brave." "You are the bravest person I know," Owen said, taking her hand. "You have survived things that would break most people. You started over with nothing. You stood up for yourself even when it cost you everything. That is courage, Victoria." As summer moved toward fall, the ranch thrived. The cattle grew fat on good grass, and Owen made plans to drive some of them to market in Flagstaff. The house gleamed with Victoria's care, and meals remained the highlight of every day. And through it all, Victoria and Owen's relationship deepened, growing from attraction to something richer and more lasting. Then, one afternoon in early November, Marcus Hartwell rode into the ranch yard. Victoria saw him from the kitchen window and felt ice form in her stomach. She had not seen or heard from Marcus since the day she left Ash Fork, and she had hoped never to see him again. But here he was, dismounting from an expensive horse, his fine clothes dusty from the ride, his expression cold and predatory. Owen emerged from the barn to greet him, and even from a distance, Victoria could see the tension in his posture. She dried her hands on her apron and walked out onto the porch, feeling she should be present for whatever was about to happen. "Hartwell," Owen said, his voice carefully neutral. "This is unexpected. What brings you out here?" Marcus's eyes found Victoria on the porch, and his lips curved in an unpleasant smile. "I came to discuss an employee of mine who seems to have found new employment. Miss Thorne and I have unfinished business." "Miss Thorne does not work for you anymore," Owen said, his voice hardening. "You fired her, remember? After she rightfully refused your advances. Is that the story she told you?" Marcus laughed. "How charming. Did she also mention that she stole money from my saloon before she left?" Victoria gasped, the accusation so outrageous she could barely process it. "That is a lie. I never stole anything from you." "No, Then how do you explain the $30 missing from my office safe the day you stormed out? Marcus's voice was smooth, reasonable, utterly false. I have been making inquiries, Ellis. Your new employee has quite the reputation in town. Sticky fingers, unpaid debts, loose morals. You might want to reconsider having her around all these valuables. Owen's expression was like carved stone, cold and hard. Get off my land, Hartwell. I am simply trying to warn you, rancher to businessman. This girl is trouble. I am willing to overlook the theft if she comes back to work for me under her old arrangement. Otherwise, I will have to involve the law. You will do no such thing. Owen moved between Marcus and Victoria, his hand resting on his gun belt in a way that was not quite threatening, but left no doubt about his ability to back up his words. You are lying through your teeth, and we both know it. Victoria never stole from you. You are just angry that she would not submit to your demands, and now you are trying to ruin her out of spite. Marcus's smile faded, replaced by cold fury. Be careful. Ellis, you are making a very powerful enemy. I have friends in this territory. I can make life difficult for you. Try it. Owen's voice was flat and dangerous. But do it somewhere else, because you have exactly 1 minute to get back on your horse and ride out of here before I throw you off bodily. For a moment, Victoria thought Marcus might actually try to fight. His hand twitched toward his own gun, and she saw Owen tense, ready to draw. But then, Jorge and Miguel emerged from the barn, alerted by raised voices, and the odds suddenly shifted. Marcus was good at intimidating women and cheating at cards, but he was not a fighter, not really. This is not over, he said, swinging back into his saddle. You will regret protecting her, Ellis. Both of you will regret this. He rode out at a gallop, leaving dust and anger in his wake. Victoria found she was shaking, adrenaline coursing through her body. Owen turned to her immediately, his expression softening. Are you all right? He is going to cause trouble. Victoria's voice was unsteady. He is angry and vindictive, and he meant what he said about having friends. He could make things very difficult for you, Owen, for the ranch. I do not care. Owen took her hands in his, grounding her. Let him try. I will fight him every step of the way. You did nothing wrong, Victoria. You do not owe that man anything, and I will not let him harm you. But the ranch, your business, will be fine. I have worked too hard building this place to be intimidated by a saloon owner with delusions of power. Owen's gray eyes were fierce. You are part of this ranch now, Victoria. You are part of my life. I protect what is mine. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes at his fierce protectiveness. I do not want to be a burden. I do not want to cause you trouble. You are not a burden. You are the best thing that has happened to this place, to me. Owen pulled her into his arms, and Victoria went willingly, pressing her face against his chest. We will face this together, whatever comes. You are not alone anymore. Remember? I remember. Victoria wrapped her arms around him, drawing strength from his solid presence. Thank you, Owen, for believing in me, for standing up for me. Always, he promised, and Victoria believed him. But Marcus's visit had shaken something loose in Victoria, brought old fears back to the surface. That night, she lay awake in her cabin, wondering if she had brought disaster down on Owen's head by accepting his job offer all those months ago. Marcus was vindictive enough to follow through on his threats, and he did have connections throughout the territory. He could spread lies about her, about the ranch, about Owen. He could make it hard for Owen to do business, to sell cattle, to hire hands. Maybe she should leave, Victoria thought in the dark hours before dawn. Maybe she should move on, take her bad luck with her, spare Owen the consequences of defending her. She had survived being alone before, she could do it again. But even as the thought formed, she knew she could not do it, not anymore. She had put down roots here, made connections, built a life. And more than that, she loved Owen. Loved him with an intensity that frightened her. Loved him in a way she had never loved anyone except her family. The thought of leaving him, of never seeing his quiet smile, or hearing his voice, or feeling his arms around her, was unbearable. She would stay. And if Marcus Hartwell wanted a fight, he would get one. The next morning, Victoria went to find Owen in his office. He was working on account books, but he looked up with immediate warmth when she entered. Morning, I was just thinking about you. Owen, we need to talk about what to do about Marcus. Victoria sat down across from him, her hands folded in her lap. He is not going to give up. We need a plan. Owen leaned back in his chair, studying her face. What are you thinking? I am thinking we need to be proactive. We cannot just wait for him to strike. He accused me of theft. That is a serious charge, even if it is false. If he spreads that story around Ash Fork, it could damage both of our reputations. So we get ahead of it. Owen nodded slowly. We tell our side first. We make sure people know the truth. And we make sure there is no way he can twist things further. Victoria took a breath. Owen, what if we got married? Owen went very still. What? Victoria felt heat rush to her face but pressed on. Think about it. If we are married, if I am your wife and not just your employee, it changes everything. It makes it clear that our relationship is legitimate, that I am not just some woman you hired off the street. It gives me legal protection, social standing. It makes Marcus's accusations look even more absurd. Victoria. Owen's voice was careful. Are you proposing to me as a strategy against Marcus Hartwell? No. Victoria met his eyes. I am proposing to you because I love you, because I want to spend my life with you. The timing is practical, yes, but the sentiment is real. I would marry you anyway, Owen. This way we just do it sooner and gain some protection in the process. Owen stood and came around the desk, pulling her to her feet. His hands framed her face, his expression intense. You love me? Yes. Victoria felt tears gather in her eyes. I know we have not known each other very long, but I do. I love you, Owen Ellis. I love your kindness and your strength. I love the way you treat people with respect. I love the life you have built here and the way you have welcomed me into it. I love you and I want to marry you, strategy or no strategy. Owen kissed her, deep and thorough, pouring everything he felt into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he was smiling. I love you too, Victoria Thorne. I have loved you since the day I found you standing on that street corner, brave and defiant and beautiful. I would be honored to marry you, today, tomorrow, whenever you want. As soon as possible, Victoria said, before Marcus can do more damage. Then we will ride into Ash Fork tomorrow and find a preacher. Owen kissed her again, quick and happy. I will make you so happy, Victoria. I promise. You already do, she whispered against his lips. The next day they rode into Ash Fork together in Owen's wagon, accompanied by all 6 ranch hands as witnesses and protection. Victoria wore her best dress, a deep blue cotton that brought out her eyes, and she carried wildflowers that Jorge and Miguel had picked for her that morning. She was nervous but determined, ready to claim her future. The preacher, a kindly older man named Reverend Walsh, agreed to perform the ceremony that afternoon in his small church. He did not ask many questions, accustomed to the swift courtships and practical marriages common in frontier towns. Owen had brought the marriage license that he had picked up from the county clerk, everything legal and proper. As Victoria stood beside Owen in the simple church, listening to the Reverend's words, she felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was meant to be. Owen's hand was warm and steady in hers, his voice clear and strong as he spoke his vows. When it was her turn, Victoria pledged herself to this man who had given her so much, who had believed in her when she had barely believed in herself. I now pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss your bride. Owen did thoroughly, while the ranch hands cheered and whistled. Victoria laughed against his mouth, happiness bubbling up inside her like a spring. She was Victoria Ellis now, wife and partner, no longer alone in the world. They emerged from the church into afternoon sunshine to find a small crowd gathered. Word had spread quickly that Owen Ellis was getting married, and the townspeople were curious. Victoria saw friendly faces, people she had served at the saloon who had always treated her well. She also saw a few disapproving expressions, people who had believed Marcus's lies or who simply disapproved of a saloon girl marrying a respectable rancher. And she saw Marcus Hartwell standing across the street, his face twisted with fury. Owen must have seen him too, because his arm tightened around Victoria's waist. Ignore him. He is already lost. They climbed into the wagon, and the ranch hands mounted their horses, forming a protective escort. As they rode out of town, Victoria looked back once and saw Marcus still standing there, watching them leave. But his power over her was broken now. She was protected by marriage, by the law, by the man who loved her. Marcus could spread his lies, but no one would believe them anymore. The ride back to the ranch was joyful, the men singing rowdy songs and making jokes about newlyweds. When they arrived, Victoria found that the hands had decorated the ranch house with paper streamers and wildflowers, a celebration prepared in their absence. Cookie had even attempted to make a cake, which was lopsided but well-intentioned. "To the boss and his bride," Jack called out, raising a glass of whiskey and toast. "May they have many happy years and many sons to help with the ranch work." Everyone drank, and Victoria found herself laughing and crying at the same time, overwhelmed by the affection and acceptance these rough men showed her. She had found more than a husband today. She had found a family. That night, Owen carried her across the threshold of his house, which was now her house too. He set her down gently in the bedroom, and for a moment they just looked at each other, the weight of the day and the promise of the future hanging between them. "Are you happy?" Owen asked, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "More than I ever thought possible," Victoria answered honestly. "Are you?" "Victoria, I am the luckiest man in Arizona." Owen pulled her close, and Victoria wrapped her arms around him, feeling safe and cherished and home. "I love you, Mrs. Ellis." "I love you too," Victoria whispered, and then there were no more words, only the sweet discovery of two people becoming one. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Victoria's life. She settled into her new role as Owen's wife, and the ranch continued to thrive under their combined efforts. Owen valued her opinions on business matters, discussing decisions with her and taking her advice seriously. Victoria expanded her responsibilities beyond cooking and cleaning to include managing the household accounts and helping with correspondence. Marcus tried once more to cause trouble, spreading rumors about the marriage being a sham and Victoria being a woman of low character. But the rumors fell flat. People in Ash Fork had seen Owen and Victoria together, had witnessed the obvious affection between them, and married women had more social standing than single working women. Marcus's words could not touch her anymore. Eventually, frustrated by his inability to harm them, Marcus sold the Golden Rose and left Ash Fork entirely. Victoria heard the news with relief. That chapter of her life was finally closed. Winter came to Arizona, cold nights and short days, but the ranch was cozy and warm. Victoria and Owen spent long evenings by the fire, talking and planning for the future. They spoke of expanding the herd, of building a proper barn, of all the dreams they wanted to pursue together. And they spoke of children. "I always wanted a family," Owen admitted one night, his hand resting on Victoria's stomach in the unconscious hope. "Growing up with brothers and sisters was chaotic but good. I want that for our children someday." "Someday might be sooner than you think," Victoria said softly, taking his hand and pressing it more firmly against her belly. "Owen, I am pregnant." Owen's face went through a series of expressions: shock, joy, awe, love, all flickering across his features in rapid succession. "You are? Are you certain? When?" "I am certain. I have suspected for a few weeks, but wanted to be sure before I said anything. The baby should come in early summer." Owen let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "We are having a baby. We are going to be parents. Victoria, this is the best news I have ever received." "You are happy then?" Victoria knew he was, could see it in every line of his face, but she needed to hear the words. "I am beyond happy. I am blessed." Owen knelt before her, pressing his face against her stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I promise to love you and protect you and teach you everything I know. You are already so loved." Victoria ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Less than a year ago, she had been alone and desperate, fired from a terrible job, facing an uncertain future. Now she had a husband who adored her, a home she loved, work that fulfilled her, and a child on the way. It seemed impossible that so much could change so quickly, but it had, and she was grateful for every moment. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through winter and into spring. Victoria continued working, though Owen fussed over her constantly, trying to convince her to rest more. The ranch hands treated her like precious porcelain, rushing to lift anything heavy, insisting she sit down at every opportunity. It was annoying and endearing in equal measure. As her belly grew, Victoria made preparations for the baby. She sewed tiny clothes and blankets, prepared the small bedroom next to their own, and tried not to think about all the things that could go wrong in childbirth. Women died having babies. She had lost her mother and sisters to disease, and she knew how fragile life could be. But Owen's steady presence kept her fears at bay. He was excited and terrified in equal measure, reading everything he could find about pregnancy and childbirth, making sure they had a doctor on call in Ash Fork, planning for every contingency. "Nothing is going to happen to you," he told her one night when he found her sitting up late, unable to sleep for worry. "I will not let it. You cannot control everything, Owen. Maybe not, but I can make sure you have the best care available. I can make sure you are healthy and strong. I can be here with you every step of the way." He took her hands in his. "We are going to get through this together, Victoria. You and me and our baby. We are a family, and families protect each other." Victoria believed him because she had to, because the alternative was too frightening to contemplate. In early June, when the Arizona heat was beginning to build towards summer intensity, Victoria's labor began. Owen sent Tommy racing to town for the doctor while he stayed with Victoria, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, murmuring encouragement. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the day and into the night. Victoria had never experienced pain like this, waves of it that seemed to tear her apart. But Owen never left her side, and when she squeezed his hand hard enough to bruise, he never complained, just held on tighter. Finally, as dawn light began to creep through the windows, the baby came. A boy, squalling and red-faced and perfect. The doctor cleaned him up and placed him in Victoria's arms, and she looked down at her son with wonder and exhaustion and overwhelming love. "He is beautiful," Owen whispered, tears streaming down his face. "He looks just like you." "He has your nose," Victoria said, running a gentle finger over the baby's tiny features. "And your stubborn chin." "What should we name him?" Owen asked, unable to take his eyes off his son. Victoria had thought about this for months, considering family names and meanings, trying to find something that felt right. "What about Samuel? It means asked of God, and I feel like he was." "Samuel Ellis." Owen tested the name out, then smiled. "It is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect." He kissed Victoria's forehead gently. "Thank you for this gift. Thank you for our son." Victoria leaned into him, exhausted and elated. Their baby nestled between them. "Thank you for giving me a family again, for giving me a home, for giving me everything." The ranch hands came to visit later that morning, tiptoeing in to peer at the baby with gruff tenderness. They brought gifts, practical things like a hand-carved cradle from Sam and a soft blanket from the Rodriguez brothers. Cookie had attempted to bake something special, though no one was quite sure what it was supposed to be. Jack declared that the baby looked just like him, which earned him good-natured abuse from the others. "He is a lucky boy," Jorge said, smiling at the small family. "He has good parents and will grow up strong." "He will grow up knowing he is loved," Victoria said. "That is the most important thing." As the men filed out, leaving the new family alone, Victoria watched Owen hold their son with careful reverence. This man who could break wild horses and work from dawn to dark without complaint was so gentle with the tiny baby, so full of love and wonder. "What are you thinking?" Victoria asked softly. "I am thinking about how much has changed in a year. This time last year I was alone, working too hard, wondering if I would spend my whole life without finding someone to share it with. And then you walked into my life, brave and beautiful and strong, and everything shifted. You gave me love, Victoria. You gave me a home that feels complete, and now you have given me a son." Owen looked up at her, his gray eyes shining. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "We are the best thing that ever happened to each other," Victoria corrected. "You saved me, Owen, that day on the street in Ash Fork. You gave me a chance when I had nothing. You gave me hope." "We saved each other," Owen said, and Victoria knew he was right. The years that followed were full of hard work and joy in equal measure. The ranch grew and prospered, allowing Owen to hire more hands and expand the herd. Victoria managed the household with efficiency and warmth, creating a home that was welcoming to the hands who worked there and to the occasional visitors who passed through. Samuel grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his mother's quick mind and his father's steady temperament. He toddled after his father around the ranch, learning about horses and cattle, and he helped his mother in the kitchen, standing on a stool to stir pots and taste sauces. When Samuel was 3, Victoria became pregnant again. This time, it was twins, a boy and a girl, born in the cool of autumn. They named the boy James and the girl Eleanor, and the ranch house rang with the sounds of children laughing and crying and playing. Owen proved to be a wonderful father, patient and loving, teaching his children about the land and animals, reading to them every night, making sure they understood the value of hard work and kindness. Victoria watched him with their children and fell in love with him all over again, seeing new depths to the man she had married. The ranch hands became uncles to the children, teaching them skills and songs, telling them stories, slipping them into treats when their parents were not looking. Jorge taught Samuel Spanish phrases, and Miguel carved toys from wood. Jack told tall tales that made the children's eyes grow wide, and Sam, who rarely spoke, had a special bond with little Eleanor, who seemed to understand his silences. Marcus Hartwell was long gone, his threats and cruelty fading into bad memory. Occasionally, Victoria heard news of him, reports that he had opened another saloon in Tucson, or that he had been run out of some town for cheating at cards. She no longer cared. That part of her life was over, closed like a book she would never read again. Instead, she focused on the life she had built, the family she had created. Every morning she woke beside Owen, and every night she fell asleep in his arms, grateful for every day they had together. She cooked meals for her family and the hands, ran the household, helped with the accounts, raised her children, and loved every moment of it. One evening, when the children were settled in bed and the ranch was quiet, Victoria and Owen sat on the porch as they had done so many times before, watching the stars come out over the desert. "Do you ever regret it?" Owen asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Marrying me, living out here, raising children in such a remote place?" "Never," Victoria said without hesitation. "Not for a single moment. This is the life I was meant to live. You are the person I was meant to love. Everything that came before, all the loss and pain, it led me here. And I would go through it all again if this is where I ended up." Owen pulled her closer. "I love you, Victoria Ellis, more now than the day I married you, and I loved you completely then." "I love you too." Victoria tilted her face up for his kiss, sweet and familiar and perfect. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, for hiring me that day, for changing my life. Thank you for letting me," Owen murmured against her lips, "for staying, for building this life with me." They sat in peaceful silence, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something lasting and good from the ashes of their separate pasts. The ranch sprawled around them, the cattle lowing softly in the distance, the creek murmuring its eternal song. Their children slept safe and warm inside, dreaming the innocent dreams of childhood. This was happiness, Victoria thought. Not the absence of trouble or pain, but the presence of love and purpose and connection. She had been fired from a terrible job for refusing advances she would never have accepted. Owen had hired her that day, had paid her triple what she had been making, had given her far more than just employment. He had given her a home. He had given her a family. He had given her a future, and she had given him the same things in return, two hearts finding completion in each other, two lives intertwining into something stronger and better than either could have been alone. As the years continued to pass, Victoria and Owen's family grew in happiness, if not in number. Samuel became a skilled horseman, helping his father with the ranch work as soon as he was old enough. James showed a talent for numbers and often helped Victoria with the account books, his young mind quick to grasp figures and calculations. Eleanor inherited her mother's gift for cooking and her father's love of animals, spending hours in the kitchen or in the barn with equal enthusiasm. The ranch prospered beyond Owen's early dreams. His cattle became known throughout the territory for their quality, and buyers came from as far as California to purchase breeding stock. He hired more hands, built a proper bunkhouse and a second barn, expanded the house to accommodate the growing family. But he never forgot the principles that had built his success: fair treatment of workers, honest dealing with customers, and the understanding that people mattered more than profits. Victoria became known throughout Ash Fork and the surrounding area as a woman of kindness and capability. She took in women who needed help, offering temporary work and shelter to those fleeing bad situations, remembering her own desperate circumstances all those years ago. She taught young girls from town how to cook and sew, passing on skills that would help them survive. and she made sure everyone who came to the ranch, whether worker or visitor, was treated with dignity and respect. On their 10th anniversary, Owen took Victoria back to the creek where he had first kissed her. The willow pool was unchanged, eternal and peaceful, the water still flowing clear over smooth stones. "I wanted to come back here," Owen said, holding her hand, as they sat on the same rock where they had sat a decade before. "This place is special to me. It is where everything began." Victoria smiled, remembering that afternoon, the nervousness and hope she had felt, the moment when friendship had transformed into something deeper. "I was so scared that day, scared of what I was feeling, scared of getting hurt, scared of hoping for too much. And now I am just grateful. Every day I wake up grateful for you, for our children, for this life we have built." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know what is funny? Marcus thought he was ruining my life when he fired me. He thought he was punishing me, but really he set me free. He pushed me out of a bad situation and directly into the best thing that ever happened to me. In a strange way, I am grateful to him too." Owen laughed. "I am not quite that forgiving, but I understand what you mean. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. That is life, I suppose, full of unexpected turns and strange blessings." Victoria lifted her face for a kiss. "I love you, Owen Ellis. Thank you for 10 wonderful years." "Here is to 50 more," Owen said, and kissed her thoroughly, the same passion and tenderness he had shown on their wedding day still burning bright. As their children grew into young adults, Victoria and Owen watched with pride as they pursued their own dreams. Samuel decided he wanted to be a rancher like his father, and Owen began teaching him everything about managing the business, preparing him to eventually take over the Ellis Ranch. James surprised everyone by wanting to study law, and Owen and Victoria scraped together money to send him to school in San Francisco, believing in the importance of education and opportunity. Eleanor fell in love with a young veterinarian who had set up practice in Ash Fork, a kind man named Peter who treated animals with the same gentle care Owen had always shown. When Peter asked for Eleanor's hand, Owen gave his blessing, and Victoria planned a beautiful wedding at the ranch, remembering her own simple ceremony and wanting something grander for her daughter. The years brought challenges too. Droughts tested the ranch's resources, and there were bad years when cattle died and money was tight. Owen's father passed away, and though they had been distant for years, Owen mourned the loss of what might have been. Victoria faced her own sorrows, losing several babies to miscarriage between pregnancies, grief that left scars even as she remained grateful for the children she had. But through it all, their love remained constant. Owen never looked at another woman with anything but mild interest, his devotion to Victoria absolute. Victoria never regretted her choice, never wondered what her life might have been if she had made different decisions. They had chosen each other, and that choice had been right in every way that mattered. On the evening of Victoria's 50th birthday, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Samuel was there with his wife and 3 children. James had come back from California with stories of his law practice and his fiancée. Eleanor and Peter lived close enough to visit often, and they brought their young son and newborn daughter. The ranch hands, some retired now but still considered family, came to wish Victoria well. As Victoria looked around at the crowded table, at the faces of people she loved and who loved her in return, she felt overwhelmed by the richness of her life. She thought about that young woman standing on the street in Ash Fork, frightened and alone, facing an uncertain future. She wished she could go back and tell that girl that everything would be all right, that the best years of her life were still ahead, that love and family and home were waiting just around the corner. Owen raised his glass in a toast. "To Victoria, the heart of this family and this ranch. You have given us all so much, more than you could ever know. You took a broken cowboy with a struggling ranch and turned him into a happy man with a thriving business and a beautiful family. You have been my partner, my love, my best friend for 30 years now, and I hope for 30 more. Happy birthday, my darling." Everyone drank and cheered, and Victoria wiped away happy tears. "Thank you all for being here, for being part of my life. I have been blessed beyond measure. Owen, you say I gave you everything, but you gave me just as much. You saw value in me when I could barely see it in myself. You offered me a chance when I needed it most. You loved me when I had forgotten how to hope for love. Everything good in my life came from that moment when you stopped me on the street and offered me a job. You saved my life, Owen Ellis, and I will never stop being grateful. We saved each other, Owen said, repeating the words he had spoken so many years ago, and Victoria nodded, knowing they were true. As the celebration continued into the night, with music and laughter and children running wild through the house, Victoria stepped outside for a moment of quiet. She stood on the porch and looked out over the ranch, at the buildings and corrals and the land stretching away toward distant mountains. The moon was rising, full and bright, casting silver light over everything. She heard the door open behind her and knew without looking that it was Owen. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. Nothing. How much has changed. How grateful I am." Victoria leaned back against him, solid and warm and beloved. "Do you remember when you first brought me here? I was so nervous, so unsure of what I was doing. I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever met, and the most beautiful, and wondering how I had gotten so lucky that you said yes." Owen's arms tightened around her. "Best decision I ever made, hiring you that day. Best decision I ever made, accepting your offer." Victoria turned in his arms to face him. Even after all these years, his face was dear to her, every line and crease familiar and precious. "I love you, Owen. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I will love you just as long," Owen promised. "You are my heart, Victoria, my home, my everything." They kissed under the moonlight, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and had built a love that would last a lifetime. Behind them, the house glowed with warmth and light and life, filled with the family they had created together, the legacy of their love. Victoria had been fired for refusing a man who saw her as nothing more than an object to be used. A cowboy had hired her that day and paid her triple what she had made, but more importantly, he had seen her worth, her dignity, her potential. He had given her respect and opportunity. And from that foundation, they had built something extraordinary. This was their story, their life, their happily ever after. And as Victoria stood in Owen's arms, surrounded by love and family and the beautiful harsh land they called home, she knew that every trial she had faced, every loss she had endured, every difficult choice she had made had been worth it to bring her to this moment. She was home. She was loved. She was complete. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the desert wind whispered through the cottonwoods and the sounds of celebration drifted from the house, Victoria Ellis smiled and held tight to the man who had changed her life with a simple offer of employment and a generous heart. The end.